as a primary money laundering concern, that's not just a strongly worded letter. It's the financial equivalent of declaring it a public enemy. And when they do it using a special authority for the first time, one specifically designed to combat Russian illicit finance, the stakes are incredibly high. That's exactly what happened to a little-known crypto exchange called Bitzlato. For years, it operated in the shadows. But this designation dragged it into the spotlight, revealing it as a critical artery for Russian cybercriminals, ransomware gangs, and darknet markets. The official line from FinCEN, the Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, was that Bitzlato posed a global threat. And at the center of this global threat wasn't a Bond villain or a cartel boss. He was just a quiet Russian tech dude living in Shenzhen, China. His name? Anatoly Legkodymov. And from behind a laptop, he built a digital empire that moved over $1 billion in dirty money. Anatoly Legkodymov was not your typical kingpin. There was no entourage, no flashy lifestyle, no Instagram full of sports cars and private jets. He was a soft-spoken tech specialist, the kind of guy who could blend into the background of an airport lounge and you'd never remember his face. But behind that forgettable exterior was an empire built not on bricks and bullets, but on bandwidth. His company, Bitzlato, wasn't like the crypto exchanges you see advertising during the Super Bowl. It was built from the ground up with a very different customer in mind. Their marketing was almost a wink and a nod to the criminal underworld. The website used to brag, simple registration without KYC. Neither selfies nor passports required. Only your email needed. It was a no questions asked financial paradise for criminals. You didn't need muscle or territory, all you needed was code. This really challenges our whole mental image of what a criminal mastermind looks like. It's a shift from brute force to technical skill, from social power to digital anonymity. Anatoly wasn't just accidentally enabling crime. He was actively designing a platform for it. So you have this quiet tech guy running a crypto exchange. It sounds almost boring on the surface. But the real question is, who were his customers? And that's where this story goes from a tech story to a full-blown crime saga, because the answer reveals just how deeply this digital empire was intertwined with the darkest corners of the internet. If you've heard of the darknet, you've probably heard of Hydra Market. For years, it was the Amazon of illegal goods. Drugs, weapons, stolen data, fake passports, hacking tools. If it was illegal, Hydra sold it. And Hydra, like any massive enterprise, needed a bank. That bank was Bitzlato. Think about that for a second. Over half of all the money flowing through Bitzlato came directly from Hydra. It wasn't a small part of their business, it was their business. And this wasn't just limited to Hydra. The Department of Justice found that Bitzlato also processed more than $15 million in ransomware proceeds. It was a one-stop shop for cashing out cybercrime. And the most stunning part, Anatoly knew. He knew exactly what was going on. How can we be so sure? Because he put it in writing. The FBI didn't need to plant an informant or run a complex sting operation. They just needed to read Anatoly's own internal chat logs. In messages to his own team, he casually mentioned that their users were, and I'm quoting here, addicted to Hydra, and that Bitzlato was known to be used for drugs. He even dismissed the idea of implementing identity verification, or KYC, by saying that criminals would just buy fake IDs anyway. It's all there in black and white. One internal company analysis even had a list of pros and cons. Under positives, it listed no KYC. Under negatives, it simply said, dirty money. This wasn't a bug, it was the entire business model. Okay, so he's running a massive criminal enterprise, and he's openly admitting it to his staff in his own chat system. How could anyone be that reckless? Well, he had a trump card, or so he thought. He believed he was completely untouchable. Anatoly was operating under a myth that is very common among darknet operators. The belief is that if you run your operation from a country like China or Russia with your servers and your team located overseas, you're beyond the reach of US law enforcement. You're in a safe haven. He thought he'd outsmarted the feds. But he forgot one crucial detail. The internet might not have borders, but legal jurisdictions certainly do. And when a crime touches US soil, everything changes. If a single American victim pays a ransomware demand that flows through your service, or a single dollar from a US bank is used, or a drug vendor on Hydra ships a package to a US address, the Department of Justice calls timeout. and your business becomes their business. Bitzlato had substantial US connections. It had American users, and it was a key destination for ransomware payments from American victims. That was the hook. And then Anatoly made the fatal mistake of getting on a plane. In January 2023, he was arrested, not in Shenzhen, but in Miami, while casually visiting the United States. In fact, logs showed he was actively administering Bitzlato's servers from his residence in Florida. He didn't just touch US soil, he brought his entire criminal operation with him. Now, some might argue this is an example of the US overreaching, extending its laws across the globe. But the counter-argument is simple and powerful. The impact of these crimes is felt here. Ransomware attacks cripple US hospitals and schools. Drugs sold on darknet markets end up on American streets. The action taken against Bitzlato sends a clear message. It doesn't matter where your servers are. If you facilitate crime that harms Americans, you will be held accountable. So the feds have the chats, they have the financial trail, and now they have the jurisdiction. All that was left was to close the trap. And the raid on Anatoly wasn't just an arrest. It was a digital deep dive into the very fabric of Bitzlato's criminal operations. When investigators finally got their hands on Bitzlato's servers, they didn't find a polished Silicon Valley-style platform. They found absolute chaos. It was a digital back alley filled with evidence. There were accounts registered under names like Mr. Dirty Money, thousands of accounts using nothing but burner email addresses, and internal notes from staff openly bragging about having no KYC at all. One agent who went through the data described Bitzlato's database as something remarkable, a criminal census report. It was a complete roadmap to the underworld. The fall of Bitzlato was more than just one arrest. It was a cyber strike. It created what officials called a darknet exodus. Criminals who relied on Bitzlato's easy, anonymous service panicked. They started scrambling to find new ways to launder their money, fleeing to smaller, less efficient services. But here's the thing, fragmentation leads to errors. And in the world of digital forensics, errors lead to patterns, and patterns lead to arrests. Taking down Bitzlato didn't just shut down a criminal bank, it destabilized the entire ecosystem, making everyone else in it more vulnerable. So the empire collapses. But when you look at all the evidence, the takedown wasn't because of some brilliant new piece of hacking technology used by the FBI. It was something much more ancient, much more human. So when you step back and look at the whole Bitzlato saga, what are the big lessons here? For me, it really boils down to a few key insights. First, the modern criminal kingpin isn't always who you think. It can be an unassuming tech specialist, using code as their weapon. Second, this wasn't an accident. Bitzlato was deliberately built to serve criminals, and the proof was in their own words. Third, the safe haven myth is just that, a myth. The long arm of the law can and will reach across borders when crimes impact its citizens. And finally, taking down a platform like this isn't just about one company. It's about disrupting the entire illicit network that depends on it. The story of Anatoly Legkodymov and Bitzlato is a powerful parable for our digital age. It reveals that the new battleground for justice isn't in jungle compounds or backroom deals, but in lines of code and chat logs. It teaches us that arrogance, born from a false sense of digital immunity, can be the most fatal flaw, proving that while the internet may have no borders, the rule of law still finds its way. In this evolving landscape, staying curious about the unseen forces shaping our world and recognizing the subtle shifts in how power and crime manifest becomes not just an intellectual exercise, but a civic imperative.